Hello, and welcome to a video presentation on angles. Here's what you'll learn: how to identify angles and parts of angles. What is an angle? Two rays with a common endpoint form an angle. This common endpoint is called a vertex. Now let's add identifying points for the rays and a number for the angle. The angle created by rays BA and BC can be identified in several ways. We can use the number by the angle and call this angle 1. Or we can use the common endpoint to identify the angle and call it angle B. Finally, we could use the points on the rays that surround the angle and call this angle ABC or angle CBA. If the measures of angles are not given, they are easy to measure fairly accurately using an instrument called a protractor. This lesson will not require the use of protractors to find angle measures. Let's take a look at an example. Provide the measure of each requested angle, and the first angle we're looking for is angle QVU. Let's identify the points Q, V, and U on our diagram. They're located right there, and they happen to surround a measure of 40 degrees. So the measure of angle QVU is 40 degrees. What's the measure of angle SVT? Again, identify the points S, V, and T. There they are, and they're surrounding an angle measure of 80 degrees. So the measure of angle SVT is 80 degrees. What's the measure of angle RVT? Identify the points R, V, and T on the figure. They're located right there, and this one's a little different. It's a larger angle made up of two smaller angles. It has an 80-degree angle and a 40-degree angle. So we have to add them together. The measure of angle RVT then is 120 degrees. Finally, what's the measure of angle UVR? Find the points U, V, and R on our figure. They're right there. They make a straight line. And that straight line is made up of three smaller angles: a 60-degree angle, an 80-degree angle, and a 40-degree angle. So we have to add all three of those angles together. The measure of angle UVR then is 180 degrees. Now there are four types of angles. The first is a right angle. Right angles measure exactly 90 degrees. Then there are acute angles. Acute angles measure more than 0 degrees but less than 90 degrees. Obtuse angle. Obtuse angles measure more than 90 degrees but less than 180. And finally, there's the straight angle. All straight angles measure exactly 180 degrees. Now let me address a couple of special types of angles: complementary and supplementary. If we can identify two angles whose measures sum to 90 degrees, those angles are said to be complementary angles. If we can identify two angles whose measures sum to 180 degrees, those angles are said to be supplementary angles. Now, the two angles that make up our pair of complementary or supplementary angles do not have to be adjacent or side by side in our figure. Let's take a look at an example of identifying complementary angles. Let's find two pairs of complementary angles in this figure. As it turns out, there are only two pairs of angles that total 90 degrees in this figure. There are two 70-degree angles and a 20-degree angle that we can use. The 20-degree angle is angle GCD, and one of the 70-degree angles is angle DCE. So one of our complementary pairs then is angle GCD and angle DCE. We can use the other 70-degree angle and the 20-degree angle for our second pair. Again, the 20-degree angle is angle GCD, and the other 70-degree angle then is angle HCF. So our second complementary pair is angle GCD and angle HCF. Now let's look at this example of identifying supplementary angles. Let's find two pairs of supplementary angles in the exact same diagram. Well, as it turns out, there are 6 pairs of angles that total 180 degrees in this figure. We only need 2 pairs. Since the angles we're looking for must form a straight line, because straight angles are 180 degrees, both angles have to make up either line DF or line EH. Let's pick one pair from each line. Angle DCH is 110 degrees. It's made up of a 20-degree angle and a 90-degree angle. So we need a second angle that is 70 degrees to total 180 degrees. Angle HCF is 70 degrees. So both of these angles form a straight line, the line DF. So angles DCH and HCF are one of our pairs. Let's use angle HCF again, which we know is 70 degrees. Now we need a second angle that is 110 degrees to total 180 degrees. Now we don't have any degree information on angle ECF, but we know it has to be 110 degrees because angles HCF and ECF form a straight line. So angles HCF and ECF make up our second pair. Congratulations! You've learned how to identify angles and parts of angles.